U.S. precluded tribes from participating because you cannot put an easement on federal lands. Once they became aware of that, they did change that rule and went to the 100-year contracts. And this is where I alluded to earlier that I think some of the issues are coming full circle, because initially when we first started into this, as you recall, the first contract was started at 50 years or 100 years, and it was negotiated back to 50 years. So they wanted the long-term contracts. It didn't take the CCX very long to see that they weren't getting a lot of participation in the long-term contracts, so they went the other extreme and went to the short-term yearly contracts. Well, now we're seeing some of the other registries, specifically CAR, started with a permanent easement, went to a 100-year contract, and now, as I'm told, and maybe some of you know better about this than I do, but I am told that CAR is looking at shorter term contracts, maybe 25-year contracts, to address the same issues. So I think that issue, at least, is coming around once again. To start wrapping up the presentation here, some of the issues that we've experienced over the last 10 or 15 years, not a whole lot has changed. There's still a lack of federal legislation, still no direction as far as what direction the feds are going to go. The Bureau of Indian Affairs still has no official carbon policy, so we're still left with the question, who officially approves the contract? Is it a BIA Bureau representative, or is it the tribe that does this? And is carbon a trust asset, or is it not a trust asset? We also have the issues of trust land versus fee land versus allotments. Some of those have different rules that apply, and there are questions there. And then we run into, as we talked about, the long-term versus the short-term contracts and the issues with permanence there, permanence in insurance. The other pros and cons that I'm alluding to there is a longer contract, typically you get a higher price per ton for carbon, but once you do that, you're locked in, and that may preclude or limit some of your management schemes. You're also locked into that price. Where on the other hand, if you've got a shorter term contract, you may not get as much per ton of carbon, but there's some flexibility there. If your contract expires and the price of carbon goes up, you may be able to lock in that higher carbon price. It may also give you some flexibility in the management of your land. So another issue is the monitoring, certification, and verification. As far as monitoring goes, you know, a lot of tribes have staff on board that as part of their daily routines are monitoring what's going on in those plantations or the carbon sequestration projects. And aggregators may want to monitor that themselves, but why should tribes pay for something that they're already doing? So that has been an issue and something that we have negotiated with our aggregators. Certification has been a huge issue here in the United States, specifically for tribes. Not all tribes believe in certification, and there's almost like another big brother is out there overlooking to see what they do in the management of their land. Because federal law through the Bureau of Indian Affairs requires tribes to manage sustainably, Some tribes feel that they're already certified by the Bureau of Indian Affairs or the federal government, so why should we pay to have another third party come in and certify basically what we're already doing? And then verification as of late has been an issue. We've gone through 3 or 4 verifications now, and at each time or each verification process has been completed by a different firm. And each time a new verification firm comes in, there's an education process there. And we almost have to educate some of these verification firms about the unique land ownership and issues that, that the tribes have. And that takes time. And as an example, we started one verification process with for a CCX sale, and we timed it absolutely perfect and hit it when the market was at an all-time high of about $7.50 a metric ton. We started the verification process, but because of that verifier's lack of understanding with tribal issues and some other things, prices continued to fall. And when the verification was finally done several months later, prices were down to $2.10, I think, a metric ton. So the education of that verifier cost us thousands of dollars. Very frustrating. Other issues is exclusivity agreements. Initially, we were reluctant to sign exclusivity agreements for a very long period of time. And for a long period of time, I think we still are. But you also have to realize that the aggregator or the person that firm that you're working with is likely putting a lot of time and money into the effort also. So they want some assurance that they're going to have reap some reward at the end, at least have an ample amount of time to do some of that. So we have changed our opinion on exclusivity agreements. Some issues to look for: contract language. Just ask questions, protect yourself. But what if the project overperforms? Say you've got a contract for 100,000 metric tons, and at verification at the end of the contract you've got 120,000 metric tons. Who owns that additional 20,000 metric tons of carbon? And then ask the questions: who pays for what and when? And we're getting at registration fees there, monitoring costs, verification, how and who is going to pay for insurance, et cetera, things like that. So with that, I see that our time is just about up, and I thank you for your time. And once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact either myself or John DeGroat at the contact information you see on the screen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian and Nez Perce Tribe for participating today. It's been very interesting to hear the situation that you've been dealing with in the U.S. there. And a note to participants as well, Nez Perce was featured in our documentation regarding the First Nations or Indigenous Carbon Projects Case Studies report. So that's online at the carriersicani.ca website, which I posted on the chat window earlier. So now we're going to move on to our final presentation for the series, and this is from Neil Hughes, the forester of Ecotrust Canada. A little bit about Neil. He began his forestry training and career in Great Britain, going to Aberdeen University and getting his Bachelor of Science and Honours in Forestry in 1987 before working in forest management in central Scotland for over 7 years. Since moving to BC in 1994, Neil has worked for Western Forest Products and Waterhouse